Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our day two recap of Microsoft Ignite. Hope you guys are all awake. It is 8:30 in the morning right now, and I am Todd Knapp. If you saw our video yesterday, you'll remember Mr. Kyle Mueller. But new to our panel this morning is Edwina Niedfeldt. Edwina is one of my very valued colleagues, and why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Edwina?
Hi, Todd. Yes, I am the HR representative for Envision. I've been with Envision for about 8 or 9 years.
Very cool, and you've been attending Ignite as well, right along all us nerds, yeah?
Yes, it's a
All
little
right.
over my head, but yes.
Okay, well, good. That's fine. Actually, you're part of the reason I wanted to have you here is that there are a lot of people that would be watching this and participating with us in social media who aren't necessarily IT professionals. So I really wanted to have, the HR perspective, especially because day two was really HR heavy with Microsoft Viva, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But all right, just give me like the 50,000 foot view. Like what have you thought of Ignite so far?
It's overwhelming with just how there's so much technology, and I knew that I wasn't, I knew that I was scratching the surface with what I understood, and just to know how much more is out there is amazing. It's insane.
So I
You're
got a
not the only one
message.
who's overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. I got a message last night actually from a longtime friend in IT. He and I've been meeting at conferences. I mean, literally for a couple of decades now. And he messaged me. He's one of the best IT professionals I know, and he said it's amazing how small Microsoft Ignite can make you feel because it's just such a big universe of technology out there. So. Kyle, I hope you don't mind me kicking off our morning recap with a question. I got at least a half a dozen messages last night and after our recap yesterday saying, what is with the buckets? Why the buckets behind Kyle Mueller? One person thought they were plaster buckets. Somebody asked me if you were renovating. One guy that I know asked me if you had aquarium fish because he saw the tubing coming off of it. So just real quickly, so everybody isn't distracted and you can put all our OCD to rest, what is up with the buckets?
So I have to say it's not quite as exciting as an aquarium. I wish I had a big aquarium here, but they are actually buckets that I do some home brewing in. So the pipes that you see coming out of the top are for bottling beers.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so trendy, awesome, home brewing, right? Not at all inappropriate. I noticed there was actually one Microsoft employee yesterday that did his session from his living room, and like in the background behind him were like 60 liquor bottles on the counter. So I thought, well, we had buckets, but we didn't have 60 liquor bottles, so that's not too bad.
That can
Well,
be arranged if you want them.
all right, so day two, one of the big things, at least for me, was Microsoft Viva. You know, Microsoft Viva, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is sort of the aggregation of a whole lot of technologies that have existed for a long time at Microsoft. Microsoft SharePoint home sites is one of them. Microsoft Stream, some of the LMS learning management system platforms that Microsoft has, and it also ties together a whole bunch of technology that Microsoft has been working on for some time, of course, their AI technologies. I have to think that the Cortex team really got involved with this because Cortex is all about collecting together and aggregating knowledge, although they didn't specifically call that out. From a human resources point of view, Edwina, what did you think of Viva?
I mean, it's next level. It really it's taking all of the challenges that, I've been seeing and attending webinars on for the past year about having all of these different platforms and keeping everybody together and feeling together, and it's putting it in one place so it's completely attainable and manageable, and giving reports on it, and it's a very cool, very it's a little kind of gonna take over for some of the things that I've been piecemealing together with different platforms, and
You and
finding
every
things
HR
that I
person,
like.
right? everybody everywhere.
It's just, exactly. It's just, it's you grab something from over here, you grab something from over there. And with Viva, it's like, oh, this is just all in one place now. So you're going to be able to get all of that connectivity and workflow, and everything is just going to flow so much better for everyone, not just for HR, but for the whole team in how we're using it.
So this is actually the Viva website, and just looking through here together, I mean, obviously, these are the components that Microsoft has initially announced. Some of them are available today, some of them are coming in the next few months, but connections is really sort of the beginning point for Viva, at least in my mind. I think there's probably a lot of people that would argue that point, but we talk a lot, Edwina, about digital culture, and digital culture being so important during the pandemic for sure, but really, the pandemic is hopefully an isolated event, right? I mean, it's something that is not going to be with us forever. And then there's a world after that, and the world after that looks different than the one that we've been in for the last year, and certainly different than where we were prior. Um, I think digital culture is really hard to achieve. Kyle, in your opinion, having looked at Viva, what do you think is different as a result of Viva when it comes to digital culture?
Yeah, so I actually didn't get to attend the Viva sessions yesterday, so most of what I know is just from looking around on the website. But the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of culture with Viva is, as a BI guy and as a reporting guy, being able to actually better gauge employee engagement through the Viva platform. Because with that being part of the larger Microsoft ecosystem, if people are engaging through Viva, and if Viva is sort of being used as that home base of digital culture, theoretically, that'll be connected to Dataverse, so that'll be connected to somewhere that we can actually have APIs accessible to be able to pull reports and better view engagement and really be able to quantify that, which is really exciting for me.
I'm actively chuckling at you at this point, Kyle, because this is like that old saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Amazingly, the data guy thinks that the best part of Viva is the data. But no, I agree with you. I think getting that employee engagement metric is important stuff. But the place that leaves me wondering about Viva, and I don't know, I mean, Edwina, maybe you'll have some thoughts on this, so feel free to speak up, is, when I look at all that Viva is, I feel like there's maybe a natural obstacle here, a natural barrier to adoption, where there are going to be people who say, hey, look, we've already addressed a number of these issues. We have deployed solutions in this. This isn't about just implementing a new technology. In some ways, it's about ripping out a lot of things we already have in place that maybe everybody's already trained on. And with the pace at which technology is changing and the amount of training that we're forcing onto user populations today, I wonder, as an HR professional, Edwina, would you look at this thing and say, oh yeah, let's jump right into this, it's easy to adopt, or is there some natural hesitancy there?
There's always some natural hesitancy with me when it comes to technology. Envision has gotten me over a lot of that hurdle. I do. I think that there, on Envision sort of metric, it is a little daunting to think about that. But we also have the advantage of, we're already on Teams. We're already immersed in this culture and in this platform. Maybe a larger company that's already started to establish certain rapport and trainings. I thought it looked very easy to use and really, again, takes care of, when it comes to the metrics, it really does bring everything, kind of ties everything that we're already doing together. So not necessarily something that we need to start from scratch with, but a valuable piece for sure.
So go ahead, Kyle.
I was going to say, and Edwina, I know one thing that you and I have talked about before, just out of personal curiosity for me, is sort of the way that our current systems actually integrate, or in a lot of cases don't right now. I mean, whether you're talking about your workforce management platform, your HR platform, time off requests, everything tends to be in a lot of isolated systems right now. And it sounds like Viva is a really good way to actually get rid of that issue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I was watching it. I was a little like, well, we found this awesome, platform for this, and I have a platform for that, and then I've got to try and get, regular usage and adoption from managers and the rest of the team. And this is just everything that I've sort of, again, been piecemealing together for 2 or 3 years, all in one space. So I was just I was taken back because it's like, it's
Yeah.
just a little later than I would have hoped.
Well,
But amazing.
it is, and I think I in some respects I set everybody up a little bit with my question because the point I really came away with personally as a technologist from this was that the way Microsoft is doing this is incredibly intelligent as usual. These components, topics, connections, learning, insights, are actually, I was looking at the deployment guides last night, most of these are independently deployed. So if you already have a solution in one area, this is not an all or nothing proposition. There is an opportunity here for you to say, okay, where are the gaps? Let's start where the gaps are and then work backwards through sort of organic deprecation of existing platforms if that's necessary, or just integration of the platforms you already have back into Viva. So anyway, Microsoft Viva, very, very powerful tool from Microsoft. I think everybody at Envision is very excited to try it. I know we're going to be early adopters. I was literally in the tenant last night saying, which pieces are available to me now? And reading the deployment guides and the prereq guides and all that stuff. So yeah, if you want to learn more about Viva, reach out. My team and I are paying close attention to that, and we'll be glad to keep you guys in the loop. And as we learn more and more is released by Microsoft, we'll do some videos specifically on Viva. But Viva wasn't the only thing that was announced yesterday. There were other things that happened, particularly in the Power Platform space. So hey, Edwina, feel free to I don't know, doodle something, or this is going to get super nerdy for just a moment here, and then I promise we'll bring it back to humans. Kyle, I know if I let you loose, you're just going to go for an hour on this. So in 2 to 3 minutes, talk to me about what happened yesterday with Power Platform. And I know some of it yesterday was expansion on things that were initially announced on day one. There's a little overlap there, but go. What's got you most excited?
So the number one thing that has me the most excited, that definitely caught me off guard, but even seems to catch off guard a lot of the MVP community based on the product roundtables and the table talk I was in last night. But the ability for Excel Online to soon be able to access Power BI datasets via pivot tables directly is absolutely massive.
Finally.
Because so much of the world, especially in the financial world with accounting and finance departments, they're very married to Excel. It's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with, and it's what they want to be able to use because their existing processes are already in there. And so far, Excel Desktop has been able to access Power BI datasets, which is wonderful, but that still creates a barrier where when you open something from Teams, for example, it's going to be opening in Microsoft Excel Online. And with the ability to access Power BI datasets directly, that gives the Power BI folks like me and the data folks the ability to really centrally control company data to make sure that we have approved, promoted datasets that we know are solid with custom-built measures for our business, and empower the end users to really use them.
Time out. I'm terminology clarification because I know there are going to be people who aren't going to know what you just said. Talk to them about approved data sets, promoted data sets. What's a promoted data set?
So promoted datasets are a really awesome tool that allow the nerds like me to put together a full semantic model, a full relational model with data from, let's say, 5 different systems of yours that currently might talk, they might not talk. We pull that all together into a data model that relates all that together. And then we can create custom measures, which are like formulas that calculate something across those systems. So it might look at your workforce management system and your ticketing system and pull metrics, combining the two of those, that we can put into a data set. And promoted data sets are a way for the nerds like me to say, hey, this is a data set that we put together, we approve it, we have validated it, we know that everything in here works the way we want it to, And we want to give you as business users the ability to use this yourselves in pivot tables. Pivot tables are something that a lot of people already know. They're already familiar with it if they have any sort of intermediate or advanced Excel knowledge. And promoted data sets are our way of saying, hey, everything that's right here, it works. You don't have to worry about bad data being here.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing. I mean, clearly promoted data sets are not an announcement from Ignite, but what I did hear in a common theme at Ignite this year that I did not hear in prior years was a lot more conversation that hints towards the reality of self-service BI, which is like the holy grail of business intelligence, is the idea that Edwina would be able to open Power BI at some point and say to herself, this data is interesting, but I have a question it doesn't answer. I'm going to produce my own analytic because it isn't hard to use Power BI with some very basic training. Users can get on board. I think that's both a blessing and a curse. I think that there are a lot of data sets out in the world right now that are presenting incorrect information because it wasn't data scientists that put the models together. It's not generated from promoted data sets. It's coming out of cobbled together sets of information. So I think that whole notion of, hey, if you're using Power BI today and you're not using promoted data sets, centralized data sets, if you're not having data validation occurring, that was a very central theme. And then, of course, the governance piece. You want to talk a little about governance for a second there, Kyle?
Yeah, and before going into governance, one thing I want to mention for self-service BI too is something that actually didn't get a lot of love at Ignite because it was announced the Friday prior to Ignite. But in Power BI, object level security is now available in preview as well. Previously, for self-service BI, we would be able to narrow down the rows of a data set that someone sees so that a manager will only see their department, but we couldn't narrow down what columns they have access to in that self-service environment to say, hey, we don't want this manager to be able to pull in financial data. We would have to build them a totally separate data model that doesn't have what we don't want them to use. But object level security allows us to really have granular control of not only the rows in each table, but entire tables or entire columns that that person will no longer have access to. So that's one other thing on self-service. But on the governance side, it's really, really amazing what they're building into the Power Platform Admin Center now to give admins granular control over individual connectors inside of the Power Platform. Where let's say, for example, that you want people to be able to read information from a SQL server that you have, but you want to make sure they're not writing anything back. Previously, that wouldn't have been possible because if you have the SQL Server connector available via Power Automate or Power Apps, it's available. But now we really have the ability to say each individual action inside this connector, do we want to enable it or disable it? And that can even be done by environments or by individual groups of people to really give you that granular control over all of your business data.
Yeah, and it's something like SharePoint Lists, which got also some important updates. They mentioned it almost for just a half a second, but I thought it was like, wow, it was like the big bomb in the SharePoint List conversation, and it was half a sentence. The guy said, oh, and by the way, SharePoint Lists offline mode is coming soon. Okay, that's a big deal. Can you tell me a little more about that? But they actually, maybe they did in a session I haven't seen yet because there's only, a billion sessions here. But the one I watched last night, it was just dropped like at the end of a whole feature set discussion on SharePoint lists. But that's an incredibly exciting thing. But the connector for SharePoint lists right now, there are actions for updating an existing item in a SharePoint list, creating an item, deleting an item. So, that connector level control for me as somebody who spends a lot of time on the automation side of the world, I have always been a little nervous about the fact that anybody that has Power Automate, which is everybody, Power Automate is an end user technology, has the ability, if you're not careful about the security on your lists, to potentially delete data out of your list that maybe you don't want deleted. Well, now I can go in and I can change that control granularly Like I agree with you, major update to Power Platform.
And one other thing I want to toss in on that too, before we move too far forward, is that granular control of connectors, I think is going to really allow us to not only have self-service BI, but also taking full advantage of the low-code, no-code environment of Power Apps and Power Automate to really empower business users like Edwina to say, hey, I created this SharePoint list or this file repository where I want everyone to drop a Excel file into or drop a PDF into when they filled out a form. I now have the ability to create a automation that just says, hey, whenever somebody drops a file into that folder, I want to send me an email or send me a Teams message. And giving that granular access to admins to decide what business users can and can't do really makes me, as someone on the admin side, excited to make more things available to end users in the business and start training them on tools like Power Automate.
Yeah, I agree. And so we're 20 minutes in, or roughly 21 minutes in now, and I only want to go another 4 minutes or so. There's clearly so much at Microsoft Ignite that's been announced. There's no way we could cover all of it here, and our preference is usually to get a little more granular on a couple of things in the interest of having a valuable discussion than just regurgitating everything that happened. Tomorrow, if you tune into this, we're going to be focusing on some of the security side, but also just a high level big think moment of, if you're a customer, what are the things, given all the overwhelming stuff we've seen at Ignite, that you should be taking away? What should you be working on right now? What are the things that matter to you as a client? So if you're interested in that, join us tomorrow for our recap. I am going to just real quickly, a couple of things that I thought were very exciting. If you didn't look at the Microsoft Dynamics marketing segment yesterday and the connection of Microsoft Teams, webinars, and Dynamics, and particularly marketing automation. Take a look at that session today. As you may know, today there are no hard scheduled sessions during the day today. You can watch any of the on-demand content, and you should be able to for a few days yet to come. I don't know how long they plan on leaving it up, but do you know the answer to that, Kyle?
Yeah, so from what I remember, they are planning to leave that up for 48 to 72 hours after the event, so that everything that's in your backpack is accessible.
Yeah, so we get a couple of days. If you haven't watched that session, watch it, because there's, again, a place where Dynamics, Teams, webinars, analytics, AI, all these things come together to solve problems that we used to solve with 5 or 6 applications in our company. And the big overriding theme for me this year really has been Microsoft, I think, has done the best job I've ever seen them do, showing us how these solutions are put together. All these independent technologies come together to create meaningful solutions. This has been the year for connections between applications and use cases at Ignite. It's been incredibly exciting. I thought we would round out the session today by taking a look at something I hinted at yesterday, which was that after the announcement of Mesh, which of course was like the big thing right at the keynote, got everybody fired up for Ignite. Of course, Kyle and I both are in the HoloLens program, and we immediately grabbed our devices and downloaded the app and started messing with it. I attended the keynote in Oculus in virtual reality. I had a conversation with a gentleman yesterday who called me to talk about Mesh, and understandably was struggling with the differences between virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And virtual reality being good job, Kyle, getting in the spirit. Virtual reality, of course, being a world where when you put on the goggles, your entire world is obscured by the virtual world. And then augmented reality, we've all experienced with things like Pokemon Go, where we hold up our phone and the camera superimposes some images over real life. Mixed reality, one of the key elements of mixed reality is the ability for object persistence. And you may have heard that a few times during the keynote yesterday, but essentially in mixed reality, mixed reality, if I have a virtual object like a virtual bottle and I place it on a table, and I walk out of the room, when I come back, that virtual bottle is still there. If I disconnect from my session and reconnect, that virtual bottle is still there. The object is persistent in the space. With that, I thought what I would do is show you guys a couple of videos. The first video I want to show you, this is actually the experience from the keynote. I joined in AltSpace VR. It brought me into a lobby. As you can see, I had to walk down a hall just like I was at a real conference center. AltSpace VR, when you move, puts you in tunnel vision mode. But then I ended up in the large auditorium, and James Cameron's down there on stage. I wanted to get closer, so I walked down a set of stairs to get into the front row. I did have them trim the video down just so that you could see how this looked. These are all live people that had joined independently in virtual reality. And you can kind of see the Microsoft logo hanging up there in the corner. But that bit right there where you saw James Cameron, that little bit, whoops, there we go. That little bit was interesting to me because as they were talking about mesh, you might have noticed that James Cameron and all the live presenters, they weren't avatars. They were real imagery of these people, or very craftily built. I mean, I guess they were technically avatars, but they were avatars that looked exactly like them in real life. Microsoft Mesh is not just about virtual reality. Microsoft Mesh is about mixed reality and creating connections to people in real spaces. And so Kyle and I got together on Microsoft Mesh to have a meeting last night, and I thought you guys would like to see that. So that table that you see in the room is not a real table. That little blue table is actually a virtual object placed in the room as a hologram. Kyle teleports into the session. And you'll notice it looks exactly like Kyle because he spent time tuning up his avatar. He can see me, I can see him, but not just as static avatars. As you could see there, we can see each other's gestures. We can see its individual finger tracking. And so we were playing around with a few different things. One of them is coming up right now. Watch Kyle's eyes. So I had asked him to look off to one side, and he looked off to his right. And then I asked him to look to the left, and he looked to the left, and his avatar's eyes followed because HoloLens is tracking his eye position. Then we started mirroring, and how many fingers am I holding up, and trying to really see how accurate the finger tracking was. This is where Kyle is actively creating a virtual object that he and I can collaborate on. In this case, we just picked a silly graphic for you of I think it was a jellyfish. Yeah. And he's going to scale that and place it on the table. This is where I have the ability to select the hand tool and now work with the object that Kyle created for us, so that images or objects that we create in the virtual world are collaborative. And this is something that really mattered this summer when we ran an internship, and we had 11th graders using HoloLens to redesign public parks. They could only do it one at a time, but imagine if they could have been in there collaboratively together. This was very cool. Kyle decided to step up on a chair in his real life office to create a sun for our jellyfish, but HoloLens understands the difference. It knows that he's elevated, so I see him in my world doing the same thing. As you can see, as I walk around the table, they're persistent objects, they're three-dimensional. I can walk alongside Kyle, and this is where he left the session. And all I ended the recording here. You'll see that I just turned on the menu by tapping my palm and hit the end recording button. So I don't know about you, Kyle, but that was a crazy experience for me. I felt like it took us time. The first time we did a mesh session on day one, actually, there was a moment where Kyle had tossed me a thumbs up, and I immediately mirrored the thumbs up without even realizing it. And it was 2 minutes before we both stopped and we were like, oh, wait, holy crap, I gave you a thumbs up and you gave me one back. You saw that. And that was where we realized, wow, the finger tracking is accurate. And then it took us a while to notice that the eye movement, when I talk and he looks at me, if I'm over there, his avatar looks at me without turning its head. If you've ever been in a virtual reality space like AltSpace, when somebody is talking to you, the whole avatar kind of turns, and it's very unnatural. we have meaningful body language in Mesh, which is almost creepy. Oh, Edwina, yes.
So I'm sorry if this is silly,
No.
but why doesn't he have full arms in his avatar? He's
So,
got hands, you can see eye movement,
yep,
but
not
his
silly at
arms
all.
aren't there.
So not silly at all. Kyle, throw your HoloLens back on for a moment.
Absolutely.
So HoloLens uses a type of imaging to map a room, and it's essentially a LiDAR that maps the room. There are also cameras on HoloLens, some of them face down. The HoloLens can see your hands, but your arms are close to your sides. And so HoloLens can't accurately track where your arm position is. There's likely, and there's been a lot of discussion in forums about this, and there are actually people building apps under HoloLens that use mathematics to essentially calculate the position of your arm and the length of your arm and be able to do that. But for now, they keep it to just hands. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I noticed it in some of the events yesterday, and I wasn't sure if it was just like overloaded or something. But
No,
then seeing the
by
two of
design.
you working together, it immediately I want to do like the wacky wavy inflatable arm gestures just to see.
Well, we're at 31 minutes. It's time to wrap this up. But last couple of thoughts. I know, Kyle, you had two things on Mesh that you wanted to mention. What were
Absolutely.
those?
Yeah, so I've got two things on Mesh and a quick shout out that I want to give as well. So on the Mesh stuff, one of the things that I think is really amazing about it that Todd actually didn't even realize until I pointed it out at the end of our first call is that the audio that you actually have in it is fully spatial. So the HoloLens device has multiple microphones and multiple speakers all around your head. And so when I'm in a Mesh space talking to Todd, if he's in the room off my right hand side, I will hear him as if he's actually over to my right. If he's on the left, I'll hear him to the left. It matches the audio to wherever his avatar is in relation to me, which really just completely makes the immersive experience for me because as I walk further away from him, as I walk closer to him, the volume increases, the volume decreases. And that was just amazing. And the other really important thing with Mesh to mention that really comes into the real world use case of this is that it's fully asynchronous. So after our call yesterday, I actually went back into the room because, as you saw, the sun that I drew was a little bit ugly. So I went back into the room after you were no longer in there. I completely redrew the sun, made it a little bit prettier. And now, if you log back into that same Mesh room, the new drawings that I made will be there because we set up your office space as an actual, they're called spaces in Mesh. And now, whatever I do in that space, it synchronizes up to the cloud so that when you connect, you see the true state of that space.
Yeah, I did, and it does look much better. I still think that Jeremy Gerard and our marketing team could have built a better one than either you and or I could, but yeah, it was pretty cool. And that point about spaces is pretty cool. In the Mesh platform, you can define a space. So the space is literally called Todd's office. And if you come into Todd's office, the objects that were created by anybody that's been in Todd's office will be persistent and will be there, which is pretty cool because you could have rooms. I can imagine a world where we have rooms based on projects. So similar to what we did with the students last year, logging into a room that is public park redesign and the 3D model for the public park is already there with the changes that somebody made at a different time when they were available and maybe you weren't. That idea of being able to collaborate together on in the virtual space is just incredibly powerful, has a lot of opportunity. I can't wait to see too how it ends up affecting Microsoft Teams. There were a lot of hints in the keynote and in the videos that have been posted online by Microsoft where you see people that are in cars that are mobile and able to participate in holographic sessions. There's a video up right now of somebody joining a family event. Imagine being able to attend a wedding and do it literally in person in the actual space, but as an avatar. Really crazy world we're living in. So with that, I know we ran a little long today, but hopefully everybody got some fun out of that. Join us tomorrow if you want to hear more conversation on Azure and some of the security features, and like I said, a high level on, what's next. Conference is over. What are the next things that you as a business ought to be thinking about doing to take advantage of all that the Microsoft ecosystem really has to offer? Special thanks to Edwina for jumping into sorry, she's over there. Special thanks to Edwina for jumping into a nerd meeting and giving us her insights. And as always, Kyle, I appreciate you. We'll see you all tomorrow.